Depression simply is the lack of happiness in a person due to the decrease or disappearance of happiness hormones in the body. So the person would feel constant frustration, loss of passion, severe sadness, and never-ending negative thoughts. Also, that person would no longer feel happy about the things that they used to do before. In the past, this was called anguish, and there was always a reason behind it. There's a specific reason behind the sadness. It can be due to the loss of a dear person, unsuccessful business, or even failure in school. That's why Islam teaches us to always be patient in tribulation. And with hardships comes ease. And that if we are patient, Allah will send good things towards our way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or this depression can be due to something organic in our bodies, either because of lack of a vitamin or lethargy in one of the glands. All of this affects the release of happiness hormones in a natural way. And here the Prophet ﷺ said, تَدَاوُوا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَضَعْ دَاءً إِلَّا وَضَعَ مَعَهُ شِفَاءً. At the end, if the problem is solved, then the depression goes away, and the body will go back to release happiness hormones normally again. But after time passed and humanity developed, a new type of depression emerged, called depression with no reason. Exactly, someone is depressed but doesn't know why. In recent years, the percentage of depressed people increased to 25% in the whole world and is still rising. The loss of passion amongst people became a normal thing. Most of the things we felt happy while doing no longer make us happy. People started acquiring new habits as the times passed. Man, we don't even eat normally anymore. Most of us can't even eat without holding the phone, and most of us easily gets bored of everything. It's quite scary when you think about it. Our topic today is a bit heavy, but it's very important, and hopefully it will change the life of many of us. Today we'll generally speak about the things that might lead you to the point of depression without any reason. After the spread of drug trafficking in 1930s, researchers were studying cases about drug addiction and tried to understand why people keep taking drugs and can't stop. They found out that drugs stimulate a part in the brain to an extremely high degree. This part stimulates when we eat or drink or when we even play, but drugs stimulate it in an extremely high degree. And when this part is stimulated, it releases a substance responsible for our feeling of ecstasy and happiness. It's considered one of the happiness hormones, but only temporary happiness. When they discovered this, they did an experiment on rats in 1950. They brought a rat and put a device on his head which stimulates the brain to release a specific hormone. This hormone is a neurotransmitter that is located in our brains. They put this rat inside a closed box, but inside this box there was a button. The button is connected to the device on the rat's head. The moment the rat pushes the button, the device will turn on automatically, and the device will start stimulating the brain of the rat to release this hormone. They sat there waiting for the rat to push the button. The rat was moving around inside the box until it suddenly pushed the button. The device was activated and the rat was shocked by the emotions it felt. It started feeling ecstatic, excited and happy, and it was pushing the button repeatedly non-stop. And every time its brain would release the hormone inside the body in a high dose. It even refused to eat and drink and never left the button's side. It kept pushing the button until it fell unconscious. The researchers did the same experiment, but this time with another box. In this box was something that separated the rat from the button. This area is an electrical field. The researchers wanted to understand whether the rat would sacrifice its health and life and would endure all these electrical shocks just to push the button. And the result was the rat endured all the electrical shocks just to push the button. So the researchers realized that this hormone located in our brain is very strong and extremely addictive. After this experiment, big companies started conducting in-depth research into this hormone, and they started trading in this hormone inside our bodies without even putting a device on us. So what is this hormone? Welcome my friend to FKB channel, where fun, knowledge and book come together. We don't have time to waste, so subscribe and let's start. What made me make this video is the widespread of videos that state how happy we were before 2020. I'm sure you have seen these videos. They say that our lives before 2020 were full of joy and life, but it completely transformed after 2020 and it became full of depression and darkness. And many people lost passion in life. I found out that indeed the percentage of depressed people greatly increased in recent years. And from this point my journey to discover a whole history of a whole trade, which I named depression trade. But But before we start, we need to know that our brains release a hormone for every emotion we experience. For example, when we experience fear, our body releases a hormone called adrenaline. And if we experience stress and anxiety, our body releases another hormone called cortisol. All these emotions are only related to one hormone inside our bodies. Except for happiness. There is more than one hormone or neurotransmitter related to happiness. And each hormone has a specific role different from the other hormone. But they all lead to one result: the feeling of happiness. And the most important ones are dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine, aka hormone of ecstasy, a hormone that gives you temporary happiness for a specific period of time. But then the happiness fades away. But what's the point of this hormone if it's just gonna fade away? This hormone helps us make a specific choice, and it motivates us to face the difficulties to getting to that choice. If you're hungry, for example, your body will urge you to go eat, and when you eat you feel ecstatic and happy. But the moment you're full, this happiness goes away, and all you're left with is that your stomach is full. All this happiness is a reward and a stimulation from your body to eat and not die. But the dark side of this hormone is that it's addictive. And if it rapidly increases, it will suffer from a rapid decrease with the same amount. And that sudden decrease will cause depression. This is where the second hormone comes in play, which is considered an antidepressant, aka serotonin, which is the main hormone of happiness. The moment a significant drop of dopamine happens, you start feeling depressed. So this hormone comes to fight the depression inside you. But the problem is, for this hormone to be released in the body, there must be a result. A result for all the ecstasy that you experience. So it's a hormone which you release when you succeed in many things. But unlike dopamine, this is not a momentary hormone. It lets you feel happiness for longer periods. And in the long run, it makes your feelings balanced and makes you a calmer and less excited person. And even more confident. But if there isn't a result, you have to deal with the depression inside you, because this hormone won't get released. Which is an extremely hard situation. Because as soon as dopamine levels decrease this much, your body starts urging you to search for things to increase this dopamine levels again. So you start searching for things that makes you feel ecstatic again to balance things out and supposedly recover. That's where you become stuck in a loop of dopamine doses. To know whether you are stuck in this loop or not, I want you to do a simple thing. I want you to let go of everything in your hands and empty your room from everything, even the furniture, and only enter your room with your clothes and enough food, and stay in the room for only one day. The idea is not strange or new for us, because our ancestors would stay in mosques not only for days, but months. All they had was the clothes they wore and food to satisfy their hunger, and they would always worship Allah in the mosque every day without any distractions. It's a natural feeling that they experienced and coped with, unlike the feeling inside you, which is the intruder. If you think that this is extremely hard or impossible for you, then there's a high chance you are stuck in the dopamine loop. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. This quote by a French philosopher holds a great meaning, because most people think happiness is in the unlimited choices and the freedom in these choices. That's why most of us think money is happiness, because money gives you more choices and more freedom in these choices. Even though psychologists say otherwise. They say too much choice can produce depression. And all this takes us back to the words of the French philosopher, that we are chained everywhere. You think you are free in these choices, but you are not, since you are restricted by people's words, restricted by society's traditions, and restricted by even your mind. There is a strong relationship between chasing this illusion of freedom and depression. If we take, for example, the freest country, or the country that glorifies this freedom the most, it's the US. CNN states that the freest country, USA, suffers from unprecedented cases of depression. The depression percentage today reached 57.1% of the whole US, and the percentage is still increasing to this day. Here you can know that there's a relationship between freedom and depression. And all this because us humans will always worship things as long as we are alive. And one of these things which we can worship is our mind. Us humans can't control 100% of our brain. For example, you can feel your heartbeats, but you can't control them. The same applies to your brain if you are faced with a lot of choices and there is no someone with a better experience in these choices who might help you. At that moment, your brain starts acting out and it starts acting on its own. And it starts comparing between these choices to reach a result or take a final decision. For example, if we say that you want to lose weight, and the thing that will help you to take this final decision is the hormone of ecstasy, aka dopamine, and I made you choose between a Kit Kat and a zucchini. Your brain will compare between the two and it will pick the choice which would help you release more ecstasy hormone, and you will start having a craving for that thing. And if you are not educated about which choice is better for you and more suitable for your case and your diet, your brain will direct you to the Kit Kat. You will eat it and it will give you a negative result which doesn't suit the diet you are following. This proves that we can't control our brain 100%, and our brain can control us and control our decision making. But when did things become dangerous? It's when people started trading in this hormone hormone of ecstasy. They trade in this hormone even though it's inside our body. They started producing options for people which release large amounts of this hormone, which made people who are not aware of the danger of these products consume them blindly. And amongst the most popular products in the market are drugs, pornography, and gambling, and other things which Allah has forbidden us from. These options release a very high ecstasy hormone, more than you can even imagine. That's why there are people who are literally addicted to these things. But the problem is that all the results are negative. The body at these activities doesn't release any antidepressant, so their brain starts urging them to increase the ecstasy hormone again, so that they get out of this feeling. As a result, they become slaves to their own satisfaction and their own brain, and stuck in a closed box, trying to press the button exactly like what happened with the rats. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them when he said,
إنهم إلا كالأنعام بل هم أضل سبيلا.
These people have cut off the rope between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in search for freedom. They thought if they leave Allah's religion and His orders, they will find freedom. But at the end of the day, they worship their minds, which led them to this stage. That's why the highest suicide percentage is found in atheists, but the lowest percentage in the whole world is in Muslims, because they gave up to the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who directed them to the best choices. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
ومن أعرض عن ذكري فإن له معيشة ضنكا.
Then I noticed that the most things that increase your dopamine and make you stuck in this loop are things that Allah has forbidden. Allah guides us away from these things because they lead you to worship your mind and your lust. But after time had passed, and in 1955 they found out that those who watch TV release ecstasy hormone too, and in high amounts. It makes people sit behind the TV for long periods, and they would prefer to sit behind the TV than do many things during the day. They realized that people could release this hormone just by watching, and they started realizing that people spend a lot of time watching films and series. So they started using this to their advantage, and they started developing films and series. The development was rapid and really obvious. In 1967, huge amounts of money started being spent on films. Even countries started getting into films, and they even found customers everywhere, even among Muslims. The situation for them was even better than drugs and all that stuff, because there are specific customers for drugs and it's not legal everywhere. But this is legal everywhere and it has a lot of customers. So they started spending a lot of money on it, and films started gaining more and more popularity. They even gave that period the name of the Silver Era of films. It's the period where films transferred from black and white to colored films, after they conducted many studies and realized that colors can increase the hormone of ecstasy in our brains, and it increases our addiction to their products. Not only colors, but also realism of the film. Started from that period, films became more realistic. That's why the period was called the Silver Era of films. And films started making enormous profits, more than you can even imagine, to the point where even whole country's economy relied on it. But all that changed in 1977. This powerful momentum started declining a bit. All this was because of the emergence of something called Atari. Yes, the same Atari we used to play. Atari here changed the game for films and series. Many addicts became interested in it. The film market was only for adults and older people, unlike Atari, which attracts both adults and young people from all ages. From this point, a powerful and very rapid renaissance in video games started. It is what has gotten us to this current stage. You think all of this is a science? No, it's a market. It's a dopamine trade. They take advantage of these addicts. They reach the point where they put their whole mind inside the game, in virtual reality games. Imagine the amount of dopamine that your body will release. This is where addicts truly started to appear. There are people who even died because of video games. This is what happened to a man in Taiwan after he played for 3 days non-stop. You think this is the only case? There are many cases of death in the whole world just because of it. It became an addiction just like drugs, because it releases high levels of ecstasy hormone, and without any results, since it's a virtual world, not a real world. Imagine all his successes are in these games, but in reality they achieve nothing. Their serotonin level is at 0. He will stay stuck in these high doses of this hormone. The problem is that this hormone is a neurotransmitter, and every time the dopamine rises and falls rapidly many times, some of these hormone receptors in the brain become dysfunctional, and the addict's brain won't release the happiness hormone like before. Also, because of everyday gaming at home, the gamer suffers from a significant lack of vitamin D, which we take from the sun. Yes, the sun, which also enhances our release of serotonin, because our exposure to the sun increases vitamin D, which boosts our serotonin. That's why there is something called winter depression. But they didn't rely on video games only. In 1994, they realized that they could develop mobile phones. This mobile phone is always with its owner, wherever he goes. They tried to find a way to make this means of communication an addiction too. All this just for money. They eventually succeeded and created the first smartphone, which is called Simon. And they kept developing mobile phones to this day, until they are no longer used for calls only. You can watch films and you can even play games. Even when social media was created, they made it so it releases high amounts of dopamine and ecstasy hormones. It went from a device to make calls with to a completely different thing. A huge part of our lives that we literally can't live without. But things got even worse when the pandemic happened in 2020. We were closed off in the house and many found a way out through games, social media and smartphones. They thought that it was just a temporary way out of this crisis, and as soon the pandemic passes they will get back to their normal life. But it wasn't the case. Because the moment the crisis ended, they realized that they suffered from another crisis, a mental crisis. This is exactly what happened since the number of Steam users had a significant rise after 2020, as you can see. And I think you all know what Steam is. Steam is one of the biggest video game platforms where you can download and play games. Also, the time people spend on their phone has also increased significantly after 2020. That's why there are those clips of how our lives were better before 2020 and how it became dark and depressing after 2020. And sadly, this is a fact in the whole world. The situation was getting worse and worse to the degree that people cannot enjoy their food anymore, which is supposed to boost dopamine and ecstasy hormone to high levels, but they can't enjoy it. That's why they are using the phone while they are eating, so that their brain releases this hormone, and they eat at the same time while watching just to feel that they are normal. The problem that many people are underestimating this. Kids now, from the moment they are born, they expose them to these games just to not hear them cry all day. The problem is this is an addiction, and it might lead them to depression and psychological devastation. Even if it doesn't lead them to depression, it might lead them in the future to unbelievably bad stages biologically. When some neuronal receptors malfunction, his body won't release this hormone in normal amounts. The dopamine starts decreasing and his body starts urging him to do things that he doesn't want to do. His body starts urging him to get into forbidden things. This is where the kid loses his connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his family, and even his principles and morals. The problem is with the spread of films and series and video games today, and with the technological advancement we have reached, many people has this disease and this addiction. Nowadays, rarely do you find people who are not addicted. Also, because those options emerged, the small options that has remarkable results don't even release dopamine anymore. For example, reading books easily release high amounts of dopamine, or doing any type of sports. Remember when I said sit in a room alone for one day, without any devices, consoles, not even a smartphone? You only have the clothes you are wearing and food to eat. Imagine that you're allowed to read a book then. Imagine how happy you will feel. You will feel that this book is the best thing that happened in your day. You might read this book, finish it, and even ask for another book, and come out of this ecstasy happy and satisfied, when you might have never even considered reading a book as an option. These are the healthy and natural feelings that we are supposed to feel towards things. At the end, we must know that there are people who don't have integrity, and they don't have a religion or principles. They use our unawareness to fill their pockets. The problem is these people are steps ahead when it comes to knowledge. Whether you like it or not, they possess knowledge that me and you don't have. They don't care about your health or your mood. That's why you have to stop. You have to stop and look at yourself. They are using you as a sacrifice to fill their pockets. I want you to be at least aware that these things are bad, that they don't make your life easier. They'll make it harder, way harder. It makes the normal things which you enjoy during the day very annoying and heavy to do. All of this just because you made happiness a goal in your day. So your brain guided you to these bad options. You don't realize that this is not happiness. It's ecstasy that gives you temporary happiness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established a rule on earth that happiness is always associated with hard work and effort. The enjoyment you feel with PlayStation and video games and smartphones and social media, they are all temporary happiness. They are just ecstasy, not happiness. The moment you shut it down, you will feel so bad and so depressed. You must get away from these distractions that makes your life harder. It wasted your time and it wasted your life too. The problem is that many people say that we are better than people who take drugs. They don't know that they are doing the same thing but in the house. The other thing is that we must know that we are not like the disbelievers. As Muslims, we hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who guides us to the best options. The more we improve our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more He will guide us to the best results. And the greatest of these results is gardens as vast as the heavens and the earth. That's why they always tell the depressed individual to go and pray and improve their connection with Allah first. And this is the turning point. Improve your connection with Allah and rely on him to get out of this loop and this addiction. Start by setting one day a week where you don't use devices for fun. Only use it for necessary things. During the day, replace the time which you used to spend on devices and these addictive things with useful things that will benefit you in your life and the hereafter. For example, read Quran, or read a new book, or learn a martial art, or work out and improve your health, or take in a new hobby. You'll realize that you feel better and that day will have a good impact on your mood. Step by step until we add another day. We'll have 2 days a week where we don't use our devices for entertainment. If you keep doing this and add another day each week, you'll be surprised that your body will release these happiness hormones in a natural way. You will start feeling good during the day, and that feeling will gradually increase by time. You will start loving the same things that you used to do before 2020. At the end, we must not have a new source of entertainment in our life without studying the results of this thing first, even if this thing is not forbidden. We must know whether it has positive results or it's just a trade of a temporary happiness in return for a permanent depression. That's it for today's dose of FKB, where fun, knowledge and book. I will see you next week with a better and healthier dose.